Have you ever heard a story where every shred of evidence points to a single person, yet the most crucial piece, the body, is nowhere to be found? This is the case of Suzanne Simpson, a dedicated mother, a successful realtor, and by all appearances, a woman who had it all. She wasn't someone who would just up and disappear, but on a quiet October evening in 2024, she did. And the question that lingers, what happened that night? Because when investigators started pulling at the threads of Suzanne's last known hours, every clue pointed to the one person who should have loved her the most, her husband, Brad Simpson. But love, that wasn't what defined their relationship. Control, fear, secrets. Suzanne had tried to leave Brad before. Friends say she was terrified of him, but fear alone wouldn't keep her trapped forever. So when she disappeared, her family knew. They knew deep down this wasn't a case of a missing person. This was a case of murder. But there was just one problem. There was no body. October 6th, 2024. It should have been just another evening for Suzanne and Brad Simpson. A night out at the Argyle, a high-end private club in Alamo Heights, Texas. The kind of place where people sip wine over whispered conversations and discreet glances. To the outside world, the Simpsons looked like a normal, well-to-do couple. But beneath the polished smiles, something sinister lurked. At some point during that night, Suzanne made a decision one she would never get the chance to act on. Witnesses at the club later recalled tense body language, a woman who seemed distant, nervous, as if she had something on her mind. Was she afraid, or had she finally worked up the courage to leave? Either way, when the couple left the Argyle and drove home, it would be the last time anyone ever saw Suzanne Simpson alive. What happens when a person goes missing? Loved ones panic, calls are made, desperate searches begin immediately. But Brad Simpson didn't do any of that. He didn't call her family. He didn't alert the police. He didn't even mention that his wife was gone. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not even when she missed a scheduled real estate meeting later that day. It wasn't until 2 full days later when their child's school called, confused as to why Suzanne hadn't picked him up, that Brad finally acknowledged what should have been obvious. But even then, his reaction wasn't that of a frantic husband. No pleading with authorities, no concern in his voice. Instead, he calmly walked into the police station and said 5 chilling words. "I think my wife is missing." No urgency, no desperation, just a detached, matter-of-fact statement. Why did it take 2 full days for him to say something? Was it shock, or was he simply buying himself time? When a loved one disappears, a normal husband would be out searching, calling the police, rallying friends and family. Brad Simpson, he was busy doing something else. Within hours, detectives started piecing together his movements in the days after Suzanne vanished, and what they found was chilling. Security footage from the morning of October 7th, just hours after Suzanne was last seen, captured Brad loading his truck with an assortment of disturbing items. Trash bags, thick, industrial grade. A heavy-duty trash can large enough to store something. An ice chest, but not the kind you take on a fishing trip. And finally, something wrapped in a blue tarp, bulky, heavy, and unmistakably human-sized. What was inside that tarp? Detectives didn't have an answer, but they had a sickening feeling they already knew. Even more disturbing, Brad wasn't in a panic. He wasn't looking for his wife. He was cleaning up. When police pulled Brad's financial records, they noticed something suspicious. The morning after Suzanne disappeared, Brad had gone to a car wash. Now, this wasn't just any quick rinse. This was a deep, obsessive cleaning. He scrubbed down specific areas: the truck bed, the interior, the wheel wells. It was as if he was erasing something that shouldn't have been there. And then, as if following a script, he made a second stop: a hardware store. His purchases: cement, Clorox disinfectant spray. Cement. Why would someone need cement after their wife goes missing? And why was he obsessed with cleaning? Detectives knew what this looked like: a man covering his tracks. But without a body proving it, that would be a whole different battle. If not for Suzanne's neighbors, Brad's chilling cover up might have worked. One witness, a woman who lived directly across the street, came forward with something bone chilling. The night Suzanne disappeared, she saw something strange on the Simpsons' property. A fire, a large one. The flames were unnaturally high and the smoke thick and dark. At the time, she thought little of it, but now it terrified her because she wasn't the only one who noticed something odd. Another neighbor reported hearing a dragging sound, something heavy being pulled across pavement. And the most damning testimony of all: a man who lived just a few doors down saw Brad driving away in the dead of night. His truck weighed down. The back sagged under the pressure of something heavy. Where was he going? What was he carrying? And most importantly, was Suzanne inside that truck? When someone is innocent, their story doesn't change. But when Brad Simpson sat down for questioning, his answers shifted like sand. Detectives asked him the simplest, most crucial question: when was the last time you saw your wife? His response: at first, he said Suzanne left voluntarily. She walked out on him, no warning, no explanation. Then he changed his story. Now he suggested Suzanne had been taken, kidnapped by someone. But who? He had no names, no details, just a vague, convenient theory. And the biggest red flag: he showed no emotion, no panic, no concern, no tears. Detectives had seen this behavior before. They knew what it meant. When a husband shows no real fear about his missing wife, it's almost always because he already knows where she is. Brad might have thought he was in the clear. After all, there was no body. But detectives weren't waiting for one. By October 9th, 3 days after Suzanne disappeared, they had enough to make their move. Brad was arrested, not for murder, not yet, but for assault and unlawful restraint based on witness testimonies and the violent altercation neighbors had seen. It was a calculated move. Police weren't just charging him. They were tightening the noose, because behind the scenes, the investigation was about to crack wide open. Brad might have thought he cleaned up everything, but there's one thing criminals always forget: someone is always watching. Detectives received a tip one that changed the entire case. It led them straight to Brad's family property in Bandera, Texas, a secluded, sprawling land where no one would hear or see anything. And there, in the middle of it, they found something chilling: a burn pit, large, still reeking of chemicals. What they pulled from that pit: a destroyed laptop, 3 burnt cell phones. Why would Brad burn electronics? Unless, of course, they held something incriminating. Maybe messages, maybe emails, or maybe the last known communications of Suzanne Simpson. Detectives knew one thing for sure: Brad had gone to extreme lengths to destroy evidence. The question was, what exactly was he trying to erase? Just when investigators thought they had all the pieces, another twist surfaced. Brad Simpson wasn't acting alone. Enter James Carter, Brad's longtime business partner. A man who, at first glance, had no reason to be involved, until detectives searched his property. And what did they find? An unregistered automatic rifle, a weapon Brad never disclosed to authorities. But that wasn't the only problem. Carter was actively hiding it, tampering with evidence, which meant one thing: he knew something. Was he just covering for his friend, or had he played a role in something far darker? And the bigger question: why did Brad need an illegal firearm? Was he planning something worse? Investigators had no choice but to arrest Cotter. The walls were closing in, and Brad was running out of allies. For weeks, detectives built their case piece by piece. Every shred of circumstantial evidence pointed to the same conclusion: Suzanne was dead, and Brad was responsible. November 7th, exactly 1 month after she vanished, police made their move. Brad Simpson was charged with murder. Even without a body, the case against him was damning. The surveillance footage, the cleaning spree, the burn pit, the witness testimonies. But the most chilling revelation came when the arrest affidavit was unsealed. It painted a picture that was far worse than anyone expected. Brad hadn't just been suspicious. He had been methodical, calculated, cold. And for the first time, prosecutors believed they could prove it, even without a body. But the most heartbreaking revelation came not from police, not from witnesses, not from investigators. It came from Suzanne's own daughter, Chandler, a young woman who had spent her life living in fear of her father. And now she was ready to tell the world. "My mom was a victim of abuse from my father," she said in a statement. "She tried to leave him and lost her life." It was a direct accusation, one that confirmed what many had suspected all along. Brad wasn't just an angry husband. He was a predator, and now justice was coming. Brad Simpson might have been in custody, but for detectives, the case was far from over, because there was still one critical missing piece: Suzanne's body. And without it, the prosecution knew they were facing an uphill battle. So investigators launched one of the most extensive searches in recent Texas history. They combed through landfills, sifting through tons of garbage, looking for any sign of remains. They scoured remote properties, every inch of land connected to Brad, including his family's ranch. They searched dense wooded areas because if Suzanne had been buried, they needed to find the exact spot. But despite their relentless efforts, there was nothing. No body, no remains, no physical proof of where Suzanne had gone. And with each passing day, one question became more terrifying. Had Brad hidden her so well that she would never be found? If Suzanne wasn't in the landfill, if she wasn't buried on his property, if she wasn't in any of the places police expected, then where was she? Detectives were forced to consider darker possibilities. Did Brad dissolve her remains with chemicals, leaving behind no trace? Did he burn her body, completely reducing all evidence to ashes? Or was she somewhere nobody had thought to look yet? A hidden location, a place only Brad knew about. Investigators believed the answer was out there, but time was running out, because if Suzanne's remains weren't found soon, would Brad actually get away with murder? Brad Simpson had spent weeks denying everything. No body, no crime. That was his only defense. And in some cases, that argument works. Because without a body, a defense team can easily plant doubt, suggesting that maybe, just maybe, the victim is still alive somewhere. Brad's lawyers were banking on that. There is no body, so there is no crime. But prosecutors weren't fazed. Because while a body makes a murder case stronger, it isn't necessary for a conviction. There was precedent cases where killers had been convicted without a body. And with everything Brad had done, the cleaning, the suspicious purchases, the surveillance footage, the burn pit, the lies, prosecutors believed they had enough. But would a jury agree? Could they look at all this evidence and confidently say, Brad Simpson murdered his wife? Without a body, would justice even be possible? As Brad's trial loomed, something remarkable happened. The people of Almost Park, the quiet, affluent neighborhood where Suzanne once lived, refused to stay silent. They gathered, they held vigils. They lit candles for Suzanne outside the Simpson home, a stark reminder that she was still missing. But more than anything, they rallied behind her children. Suzanne's daughter, Chandler, had already spoken out, accusing her father of years of abuse. Now the community stood with her. Banners hung from homes, posters lined the streets. Justice for Suzanne. And the pressure, it was growing. Because if Brad thought he could outlast the investigation, he was about to learn something terrifying. An entire town was watching, and they weren't going to stop until the truth came out. The trial of Brad Simpson was unlike any other. No body, no murder weapon, just a mountain of circumstantial evidence and a jury that had to decide if that was enough. Brad's defense team wasted no time attacking the case. Their argument, the indictment is vague, the evidence is speculative, and without a body, how can we be sure Suzanne is even dead? It was a classic defense strategy. Plant doubt, twist facts, exploit uncertainty. And in a case like this, doubt was their best weapon. They pointed out that Suzanne's body had never been found. They argued that the burn pit, the cleaning spree, and the suspicious purchases didn't prove murder, only assumptions. And Brad himself, he sat there, stone-faced, emotionless. To some jurors, that might have looked like guilt. To others, it might have looked like a man who had already lost everything. But the prosecution, they weren't backing down. Their argument was simple. Look at the evidence. Look at his actions. Look at his lies. Everything points to one thing: Brad Simpson killed his wife. They played the surveillance footage. They presented forensic findings, traces of blood and tissue inside Brad's truck, too degraded for conclusive DNA testing, but enough to raise serious questions. They put Suzanne's daughter on the stand. She didn't hold back. My mother was afraid of him. She told me she was going to leave, and now she's gone. The courtroom was silent. The jurors listened, and in that moment, it became clear this wasn't just about evidence anymore. This was about whether or not they believed Brad Simpson was capable of murder. Would the jury convict him despite the missing body? Or would Brad walk free, a man without a wife, but also without a sentence? Brad Simpson sat in Bixar County Jail, awaiting the verdict. His bond, $5 million. A number so high, it was clear the court considered him dangerous. But trials like these, they don't move fast. Without a body, without direct evidence, the case could drag on for years. And there was something even more terrifying. What if Brad walked free? What if his high-powered defense team managed to sway the jury? What if they convinced just one person that there wasn't enough proof? Would Suzanne's family ever get justice? Would her children ever know what really happened to their mother? And most chilling of all, if Brad Simpson got away with murder once, would he do it again? Time changes everything. Cases go cold. Media attention shifts. The public moves on. But for Suzanne's children, her family, her community, this isn't a mystery to be solved. This is a wound that won't heal until the truth is uncovered. And that truth remains buried somewhere. Even now, investigators refuse to give up. Search teams continue combing through landfills, hoping that even after all this time, there's still something, a fragment of evidence, a trace, a clue. Cadaver dogs have been deployed to remote wooded areas, places that fit the profile of where Brad could have hidden her remains. Every property, every storage unit, every inch of land linked to Brad Simpson has been searched, but nothing has turned up. And yet, law enforcement believes the answer is out there. If Suzanne's body is somewhere in the wilderness, the elements are working against investigators. Rain, soil erosion, scavengers, time itself can erase evidence. But if Brad used chemicals, if he burned or dissolved her remains, then Suzanne may never be found. It's a chilling reality. Because for all the circumstantial evidence, for all the overwhelming signs that Brad Simpson is a murderer, the case is still missing its final, irrefutable proof. Without a body, some people still whisper, "What if she's alive? What if she ran away?" Brad's lawyers exploit that uncertainty, feeding into the slimmest chance of doubt. And doubt, that's all a killer needs to walk free. But the people who knew Suzanne best don't have doubts. Her daughter doesn't have doubts. Her family knows what happened. But until Suzanne is found, will there ever be justice? And perhaps the most terrifying question of all, what if she never is? Now we ask you, do you believe Brad Simpson will be convicted? With all the evidence, all the testimony, all the circumstantial proof, is it enough? Or will he get away with it? Will a jury hesitate, struggling with the single missing piece of evidence, her body? And the question that still haunts this case, where is Suzanne? Is she buried deep in some isolated, forgotten stretch of land? Or is the truth even darker? Did Brad dispose of her in a way that ensured she would never be found? Or does someone else know the truth? Because secrets like this, they don't stay buried forever. One day, someone will talk. One day, something will surface. But until then, this case remains a mystery, one that still needs answers. And that's where you come in. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think the prosecution has enough evidence? What do you think happened to Suzanne's body? Should cases like this be allowed to go to trial without a body? Let's talk about it, because this case, it's far from over. And the more we keep these stories alive, the harder it becomes for the truth to stay hidden. If you found this case as chilling as we did, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more true crime cases, and hit the notification bell because we cover the cases that demand answers. Until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant, and never stop seeking the truth.